Yes, that is true. The title is not clickbait. For the first time on this account's life, I have been able to full clear all endgame content. And before we get into the actual fighting of the endgame, I wanted to kind of very quickly go over my character builds, so that way if you want to use this as a baseline for your account, you have the ability to do so. So Kafka is running tutorial. She has max traces, and this is her 4-piece. Black Swan is running her sig with Lycone, traces, and 4-piece deep confinement, and then Pack Cosmic. Hysilens is also running prisoner in deep confinement, and then Reveille in C, max traces, her personal light cone, and then Hua is with abundance, max traces, and then Fleet of the Ageless Messenger, hackerspace. And since this is a dot team, the only stats you really want to care about is attack, speed, and effective rate. So as long as you're able to get these three on those stats as high as possible, you'll clear. And then Hua, you just want her to heal and go relatively frequently so she can get her ult often and do cleanse. So really quickly, I ended up using Linksha during the adventuring fight, and I wanted to make sure that I covered her in case if someone were looking to do what I did. So Linksha is a really good healer. She's running her personal icon with max traces. She's running 2-piece Forge of the Kalapani Lantern and then Iron Cavalry against the Scourge. If you were to build her yourself, you care about break effect, speed, and then, you know, make sure she has enough HP not to get wiped out too quickly. And with that said, let's go on to adventuring. So, and this video is going to function a little different because I was locked in so hard during this thing. I barely talked at all. So I'm going to just kind of watch this, and then whenever I have something to add or something to comment to help you guys, we will cut to that. So this video may jump around a bit, but it's going to only be when I have something to add and to hopefully make things better. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get this underway. The first one we decided to take on was Memory of Chaos with Adventuring. This is obviously the second side. The first side I ended up using the Herda team. And if you'd like to see me do the other sides, I can make that a video as well if you're having trouble clearing that. Adventuring is actually pretty straightforward. Basically, you just save your skill points until he uses his dice. You use your skill points to roll higher than him, and then you get your ult refunded via rolling higher than him. And then you basically just rinse and repeat that process, doing a lot of damage with your ults after he refunds it. And then that's essentially it. So yeah, we're gonna probably jump ahead and so that you all can see that happen. And then we aren't gonna linger on adventuring too long because that's honestly just the entire fight. So coming up really soon, he is going to do his dice, and this is kind of what I was talking about, where he's going to do his little like domain thing. And so we're going to use our skill points to roll as high as possible. I used her auto there because we were going to get her ult, and her ult hits everything, so we're going to always roll higher. This was also kind of interesting because the first time using Hysilens, and I went into MOC 12, which probably wasn't the best idea since I didn't have a very deep understanding of how the character worked. So my amazing chats were very quickly trying to give me a rundown on how to play Hysilens while I was doing MOC 12. So shout out to my chats. But yeah, I mean, this is basically the fight. When he does this, you save your ults, you roll higher than him. If everyone rolls higher, then you're able to do that. I guess I'll mention this. I did forget it. I used Linksha against Adventuring because Hua doesn't have AoE, so she can't roll higher consistently. Linksha does. So if you end up needing to use Linksha, that's totally fine. That just means my Herda team had Hua and then Linksha was on this one. But yeah, I think that's it for Adventuring. I mean, this fight was actually pretty straightforward, and we were able to clear pretty well consistently, which is really nice. And yeah, so that's the fight. And then next up we end up taking on is Pure Fiction, which Pure Fiction was interesting because obviously you have to get through the first wave of enemies, and that can kind of get a little annoying since the Ruin Guard doesn't like being weakness broken. I guess now that I'm watching this, I think it's important to mention this team's actually pretty skill point neutral to positive. I just wasn't playing it very well, as I said earlier. Basically, as long as Gepard has his defense reduction down from Black Swan's E, you don't have to E with Black Swan anymore, so she can generate skill points that way. And Hysilens' auto applies Wind Shear, which is really nice, so you don't have to use Hysilens' E all the time either. So the only time you really need to consistently use an E is Kafka, and then occasionally Hua when they get low on HP and when she runs out of stacks. So other than that, this team is actually really skill point neutral to positive, which is really nice. But yeah, so, and then That's so much damage. I wasn't paying attention earlier to how much damage was going on because I was so focused on winning. That hit so hard. Ooh, okay. So, and this is Fei Xiao. Fei Xiao is actually, I'm going to probably talk a lot when it comes to Fei Xiao because her mechanics was actually quite difficult. I actually ended up losing a few times during this, and we'll probably cut to when I lose just to kind of explain my decisions that I made that were horrible, and then I can explain why I made them. Yeah, so here it is. This actually happened faster than I thought. So let's go ahead and pause this. So Fei Xiao will let you pick one of your characters to turn into a Borson. The Borson has very, very good break effect, and you'll see this on the run that I win because I figured this out like my third attempt of this. The Borson has very, very good break effect, so but it's always physical. So what I ended up doing is at this run I ended up not using the skill points on the Borson, so he wasn't hitting more than one target, which is not good since his break effect is really, really high. And then I was also turning Hua Hua into a Borson, which isn't like the worst idea. But once you get into phase 2, it starts to hit a lot harder. So I would probably avoid the healer. Yeah, see, I just died right there because I put my Hua Hua in the Borson state, which ended up causing her to go much slower than she originally was supposed to, which caused Black Swan and Hysilens to get really low on HP. Which you'll see in just a moment. She's going to hit really hard, and it's going to actually end up killing Hysilens and Black Swan at once, and it's going to debuff Kafka. So that's why you should probably avoid doing that with your healer unless you have like adventuring on your team as well, which I don't know why you would, but if you have another way to mitigate that, I can see it working. So here, this is the winning run. This, I always made Black Swan the Borson, and it's kind of how I mentioned earlier. The Borson has really high break, so you're able to actually break Fei Xiao and her little wolf spirit animal, I don't know, much, much faster. I would recommend trying to use the E as much as possible. I learned that later on in the run, but because the Borson's always physical, it's always going to do physical break, which is so much better because like she's not weak to wind, so I either have to choose to hit here and not do anything too much to Fei Xiao, or hit here and not benefit Fei Xiao either. So I would probably recommend trying to pick the character that's going to do the least, and then just like always pick them as the Borson, and then try to use their E as much as possible because it attacks 3 at a time, which is really, really nice, and it increases your toughness. The toughness, or decreases the toughness of the enemies. Like, see how much break that just did? And then obviously when the buff, or I guess debuffs in this sense, ends, it kind of pushes the character forward, so the actual character gets to take a turn as well. You don't have to weakness break all of them. If you weakness break 1 or 2 enough times, the overall bar will go down, and then when that bar is depleted, all of them get broken, which is another thing to think about. So you can kind of target, like if you, say for you with a Borson, you can hit your E on the foot, and that'll hit the ball and Fei Xiao. And I feel like the ball and the foot are relatively easier to weakness break than Fei Xiao and the head. So if that's probably what you want to prioritize, to try and break them as fast as possible to then get the buff from, you know, it being APOC and caring about breaking enemies. And see, this is her second phase. So now you can't actually hit Fei Xiao. So the Borson's going to get maximum amount of value because this is easy relatively to weakness break. So is this one. This one's going to take a minute. But now you can hit all of them without having to worry about missing out on one, because when Fei Xiao's down here, you always miss the one on the far sides. A viable strategy would honestly probably to be like, if you don't have a dot team, try to bring like a hyper carry team, but instead of using all of your buffs on the like hyper carry, you can try and use your push forward on the Borson to break as fast as possible. Like if you have Sunday in Saber team, you can swap Saber. You could probably end up choosing Robin as the Borson or something like that, and then have Sunday just constantly push up the Borson, and then that would allow you to break much faster. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with the Borson, especially in phase 2, now that you have the option to actually hit every part of the enemy, which is really cool. So something that's super specific to Hysilens and a few other characters at that, but I mainly just saw this about Hysilens and I wanted to talk about it. don't be afraid to hold on to her ult. Like you see here, it broke and I got everyone's ult back. I don't immediately use Hysilens ult because, and the bar's kind of blocking this, but Hysilens has 3 turns of her buff. So I would really try to hold on to it until you either need to use it for like adventuring or something, because he refunds it anyway. You're about to break face out because then it will be refunded again. Or if you run out of the buff or your buff goes down to 1 tick, because you can usually get the ult back before it gets to 0, so you can kind of use it in those scenarios. But don't be afraid to hold on to Hysilens ult. But other than that, I think, yeah, we just do 20% in 1 hit. Todd's insane. Todd is actually insane. That's nuts. Yeah, so that was the first time I've ever been able to beat all in game, and this is the first time I've ever seen this icon on my account, which is insane. I'm really excited that I was able to actually do this, and then this makes me even more excited for the new endgame coming next patch. So with that said, thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate each and every one of you. I guess just because I kind of want to show it off, because I'm really proud of this. The 3, I've never seen this screen before, and that makes me so happy. But with that said, thank you guys. If you don't mind leaving a like, comment, and subscribing, that'd be greatly appreciated. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.